Well, the market is looking at one set of data. Fed is looking at something else. The market is looking at the rate of change, and rate of change of PPI, CPI, first quarter GDP, they were all very strong. And then, of course, we have 120 billion Fed purchases of bonds and 1.9 trillion from Biden administration on the fiscal package. But when you look at the stock of where, or the level of where the economic activity has been, the number of workers working is still more than 8 million less than we had in February of 2020. Inflation rate never picked up with all that astronomical QEs over the years. Yeah. Unemployment is still 6.1 instead of 3.5 in February 2020. And the fact that even at February 2020, the inflation did not pick up at 3.5 unemployment rate. That, I think, is a very big part of the Fed's decision on whether to stop easing now or later. And the indication I get is that the Fed is still saying, well, we still have a long ways to go before we will hit anything close to a real inflation shock. So why don't we keep on going? Because what we are seeing now is this kind of temporary adjustments that happens when economy tries to go back to normal. And so these two very different views, looking at rate of change, and the other guy is looking at the level. And I must say, in the long run, I think the Federal Reserve is probably correct, because we have had all these monetary easing and we still had no inflation for a very long time.
But, sir, just to play devil's advocate on that, I think the fear by some economists and others in the market is that once inflation does rebound, it could do so sharply and quickly, and then the Fed may find themselves in a position of having to overcorrect if they are indeed behind the curve. And then you're talking about potentially raising the risks of a recession in an overcorrection. Is that a possibility?
Well, that's what Fed was worried about starting from 2013. Remember, 2013, they start doing the tapering. 2015, they raised interest rates, and they raised interest rate 9 times. And then 2017, they did QE. All of that before we had 2% inflation rate. All of that was done before inflation rate was 2%. And that was exactly the kind of thinking that they probably had. But by the time you get real 2% inflation rate, it'll be too late. Because at that point, the Fed will have to remove all this liquidity in the market while the people are coming in to borrow money. And the reason we have had so little inflation rate over the years is that if you look at the US private sector as a group, household sector, corporate sector, financial sector, all taken together, they have been huge net savers, what we call a financial surplus in terms of flow of funds data. And they've been saving something like 6% of GDP on average with zero interest rates for the last 12 years. That's a ridiculous number, because at zero interest rate, they should be borrowing 6% of GDP, not saving 6% of GDP. But that's what we had over the years. And if that is really going to change, some spectacular new technology or something, then the Fed should be really worried. But so far, we haven't seen that kind of technology come along to suddenly make everybody wants to borrow money. And then when that happens, of course, inflation will be a problem.